Alrighty, this is Politics at Home with Holmes, and this is a special edition. This is Alberta edition. I mean, it's always Alberta. This is Alberta Prosperity edition.
Yes.
Because this is part one of our family meaning us three, going through a document. We have gone through it once, and then we all agreed this is a valuable thing to break down the context of for other Albertans. It's called The Volume of Freedom. Everybody, you can find this document to read along with us, or it's on the screen. It is on, can we take over all of the federal
responsibilities,
services that they currently offer? Can we take over healthcare? Can we take over the RCMP? Can we take over all of these things?
It's yours to discern, but honestly, the answer is yes.
The
after
answer
reading this.
We announce
And
our
then
bias
some.
in advance.
This and then some.
It is on the Alberta Prosperity Project, and if you just scroll down a
Website.
little, you can find the free PDF. Without further ado, here we go. So, Dad.
Notice to the reader is where we begin. This document is based on a wide variety of sources, including Statistics Canada, the province of Alberta, budgets, public documents from accounting firms, and similar discussions on multiple forums. Particularly for historical numbers, these sources have been used jointly to provide a straightforward, understandable, and reasonably accurate basis for calculations. As such, the figures used in this plan are approximate and ought to be considered to be plus or minus 10%. As they are frequently estimates, they will not balance to the penny, but are believed to be directionally robust and within accepted planning tolerances. It is important to note that the section dealing with the plan for Alberta's Indigenous nations is drafted with the utmost respect for the sovereign and Indigenous people of Alberta. It is in no way intended to replace or diminish treaty rights, which will be a required subject for discussion and negotiation in the context for the development of the Constitution for the Commonwealth of Alberta, which could include a continued role for the Crown of Alberta in the context of any further constitutional arrangements. It is not the purpose of this document to in any way prejudice or predetermine the outcome of such constitutional negotiations, which will proceed with all due respect to the constitutionality protected treaty and Aboriginal rights of Alberta's Indigenous people and their ongoing relationship with the Crown. Throughout this document, we have tried to use conservative estimates based on historical actuals or current budgets. The authors believe that the share of the Canadian pension plan owed to Alberta is as the LifeWorks report states, namely $334 billion plus subsequent returns. Purely to make a conservative estimate, we have elected to use half that figure as the worst case for this draft plan. In all but the last section, Towards a Great Economic Future, we have deliberately avoided using greatly increased future revenues arising from the very positive effect of being able to fully exploit our natural resources. We also deliberately avoided government and business cost savings, which could come from simplified tax codes, regulations, and a more modern use of technology, including AI, which we believe are significant, perhaps as high as 50%. As a result, we take the view that the base documents is the low, least positive case for an independent Alberta. We believe that over time, a sovereign Alberta could become one of the lowest taxed and regulated nations in the world, rivaling jurisdictions similar to Dubai and Monaco.
Yeah, I just want to highlight two things in that where they don't even include what it is that we could get for future revenue from if we fully exploited our natural resources, which is primarily oil and gas, right? And then they say that this is the least positive case for an independent Alberta.
Introduction. The intention of this document is to provide clarity on the finances and key elements of an independent Alberta compared to Alberta as a province in the Canadian Dominion. It seeks to answer the question, what is the tangible value of independence for Albertans? It presents a financial analysis for an independent Alberta, focusing on the province's potential to retain 68 to 75 billion in annual federal tax contributions, establish an Alberta pension plan, replace federal services, and implement a robust environmental strategy. By directing some of the over contributions, 44 to 47 billion annually, Alberta could fund all critical services, reduce taxes, and invest in sustainability. The environmental strategy emphasizes leveraging Alberta's vast natural landscapes to mitigate concerns regarding carbon dioxide levels. Free from external climate agendas, this strategy prioritizes local environmental and economic goals, ensuring a sustainable, self-determined future for Alberta. This will completely eliminate all externally imposed limits on CO2 provisions to Alberta's forests, prairies, grasslands, and farmlands. All of this is in addition to the appeal of freeing ourselves of the restrictions placed on us by a confederation which no longer shares the values, culture, entrepreneurship, and desires which characterize Albertans. One could argue that even if the financial benefits were neutral, the appeal of independence and freedom to act is in itself compelling. An executive summary, page 7.
And he's
We're
like,
doing
"We're
it
the-"
live.
He's like, we're at the end of the document.
Okay, let's just remember one. Page 7.
Yep. An independent Alberta would reshape its fiscal and environmental landscape by retaining 68 to 75 billion in annual federal tax contributions, yielding a net gain of 44 to 47 billion after accounting for 22 to 26 billion in federal transfers. Combined with provincial revenues, a 74.1 billion, 25-26, and an Alberta pension plan, APP, generating 23.34 billion annually from 183.7 billion asset base, total revenues reach 142.1 to 149.1 billion. Expenditures, including 75.3 billion for provincial services and 22.7 to 31.6 billion to replace federal services, e.g. defense, policing, Indigenous services. Total 98 to 106.9 billion, with one-time setup costs of 2.8 to 5.7 billion. This results in a fiscal surplus of 29.4 to 48.3 billion excluding setup, or 23.6 to 45 billion including setup, enabling significant tax reductions, infrastructure investment, and debt reduction. Tax reductions could include eliminating GST and provincial personal/corporate income taxes, PIT/CIT, respectively, reducing average annual total tax load by 29% from the current annual total tax load of 38,000, average of all forms of taxation/payments, PIT/CIT, excise, GST, EI, CPP, reduced to 26,000 per taxpayer, or eliminating federal PIT/CIT, cutting taxes by 46%, reducing the average personal tax by 18,000 to an average of 20,000. Alberta's resource wealth and policy autonomy enable a sustainable, economically robust future, prioritizing local environmental needs over any other irrelevant policy inputs. What happens if Alberta grows aggressively? The final section speculatively examines the financial impact of an aggressive growth strategy for an independent Alberta. It considers removal of restrictive regulations to foster foreign and domestic investment, delivering substantial benefits to citizens, support municipalities, and ensure long-term fiscal stability. Under this plan, oil production is projected to grow from 3.8 million barrels per day in 2023 to 9.5 million by 2045, and natural gas from 11 billion cubic feet per day to 21 billion cubic feet per day. Direct revenue could rise from 144 billion in 2025 to 334 billion by 2045, and savings from deregulation savings contribute to a total economic impact of 8.2 trillion, including 300 to 450,000 new jobs. The fiscal framework that is suggested estimates personal income tax
Eliminates.
Thank you. The fiscal framework that suggested eliminates personal income tax, reduces corporate income tax to 10%, and introduces a 5% AST, also replacing property taxes with a frontage and per hectare fee, municipal residency fee, and using the provincial grants to ensure continued funding for essential services like roads, schools, and public safety. This suite of options is used as an example. There being many other options, including balancing reductions of income tax against elimination of property taxes to better protect property rights, as well as potentially lower levels of GST. Citizen-focused policies, including reducing post-secondary tuition, providing free pharmacare and dental coverage for 1.5 million children, low-income households and retirees, and investing in venture capital for technology, advancing manufacturing and agriculture to diversify the economy. The Heritage Fund can now be seen to grow to 1.3 to 1.4 trillion by 2045 with a 4% real return, generating 52 to 56 billion annually for future stability.
That's the summary. So we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of how that actually plays out. But I just love how it says direct revenue could rise from 144 billion in 2025 to 334 billion by 2045, and savings from deregulation contribute to 8.2 trillion, including that many new jobs. So that's pretty good.
Not just that, but the part where they talk about some of the things, because you have this overall benefit of retaining finances, like retaining, if we over contribute the 44 to 47 billion annually, all of that can go towards what they said.
Yeah, which we'll get on in the next section.
Low-income households, retirees, even the fact that they brought in the free pharmacare and dental coverage for people. It's like, oh, so these radical conservatives, supposedly, because they're in favor of Alberta independence, are including things like all of the money that could go towards healthcare and hospitals because we have more money in our pockets, period. So they're also not just a radical rights considering only right things like private property and then the guns. They're also considering the technology advancements, and then
it makes the ability to be charitable way more easier. So if we wanted social programs, like, then we can feasibly make it happen because we are being way more frugal with our money.
Yeah, this is bipartisan. This has nothing to do with whether it's NDP or liberal or conservative. I would say, for the sake of, let's try to actually have people consider the fact that there's 4.3 million of us in Alberta. This is for us. This is for us as a people. This has nothing to do with politics when it comes to what camp. Everybody has a motivation. That's why you go into sort of a party camp, if you will. But that's not what this is about. This is actually sitting back going, in spite of whatever motivates you to be in the parties that you may be in, the outcome is prosperity and better infrastructure, better services for all priorities of all Albertans. There's going to be a lot to go around, and we have to roll up our sleeves. There's a lot of work here, but we've been doing that anyway.
There's literally 2 questions that I can ask people for those skeptical to read this document. And that is, do you want more money in your pocket? Okay. And do you want the money in your pocket to go further? Okay, then listen up. And there you go.
So, revenue available to an independent Alberta using historical data. We are not going to be breaking down all of these charts. They're going to be scrolled. You can take a look. All this information, we encourage you, go to the site, take a look. We are going to be reading from here forward things to do with the summary.
Key observations.
Key observations will be,
yeah.
So just so that you guys understand, I'm not going to start spouting off numbers that'll bore everybody to death, including us. 'Cause this is also an example of plebs in real time trying to learn and understand what does it actually look like for the mechanisms of action for us to move forward as a peoples, the Alberta peoples. Summary. This document outlines the revenue available to an independent Alberta based on estimated federal tax contributions from the province for 2021 to 24. Alberta is estimated, Alberta is estimated to have contributed approximately 68 to 75 billion annually to the government of Canada, with only 22 to 26 billion returned in federal transfers, resulting in a net over-contribution by Albertans to Canada of 44 to 47 billion per year. Let that sink in.
Oh my gosh.
Watch Elon Musk with the sink.
We give 68 to 75 billion annually to the government of Canada, and we only get 22 to 26 billion back in federal returns. And that is an over contribution, money that is our money that is not coming back to us, of 44 to 47 billion. That's almost $50 billion. That is Albertan money that's not coming back to us by the federal government.
It's a mafia shakedown. That's what that is. You have a nice business here. I'd be ashamed to see something happen to it.
Man, Quebec and Ottawa must be so happy.
So, if Alberta were independent, retaining these revenues comprising personal income tax, PIT, corporate income tax, CIT, goods and services tax, GST, excise tax, and employment insurance, EI, and Canada Pension Plan, CPP contributions would significantly enhance its fiscal capacity. This analysis suggests that an independent Alberta could have access to an additional 44 to 47 billion annually, enabling substantial investments in infrastructure, public services, and economic diversification. So the estimated federal tax contributions from Alberta in these charts is based on available data. Alberta's federal tax contributions for the 21 to 24, they're broken down as follows. Those numbers are in billion CAD for those who are going to follow up and take a look at these charts. So we're going to make our way down to key observations. We have total contributions. Alberta contributed an estimated 68 to 75 annually to federal revenues, driven by its strong oil and gas sector. 87% of Canada's crude oil exports, 98% of natural gas with British Columbia, and high per capita income. Net contributions. After accounting for federal transfers back 22 to 26 billion annually, Alberta's overcontribution to Canada was approximately 44 to 47 billion per year, totaling 185 billion over 4 years.
Wow.
4 years, everybody.
185 billion over. Can you imagine what you could do with 185 billion dollars
In 4 years? How many
In 4
infrastructure
years?
projects?
Oh my gosh.
Well, and if you want to add a little bit of color to that, that is your labor. That's all of our labor. Whether you come from the NDP, the Liberals, or the Conservatives, or any of the other parties that are out there, except for maybe the Communists, because they like to spend other people's money. That's your labor taking flight. Your hard work. Every day you get up and you do the grind. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, though, would be like, oh, but that money, it's going towards the rest of Canada as well because we have the equalization payments. And there are some that are like, well, because we're a part of Canada, we're okay with giving to them. There's no problem with that.
Well, if you'd like to offer an olive branch to individuals that think that way about Canada, technically then we could have a foreign policy where we actually could have what we would call maybe the Good Neighbors Act. This is me just spitballing. And so we take a look at the funds, and once we have our ducks in order within our own sort of fences, so to speak, if we would like to make a donation to a country less fortunate than our own, which would be the rest of Canada, then I bet you we could probably put it to a referendum or a vote, and we could decide to care for our neighbors, because that is also something that we like to do. So that's just me throwing out a possibility.
I think most people would agree that because of how tough times are, that we need that money to keep ourselves afloat. Because at the moment, we don't know entirely where our taxes are going. And some of it we might not agree with, right? And so then if we start giving it out to other places in Canada, as we have been doing, let's face it, most people aren't even following where their tax dollars are going in the own province they live in, let alone all the other provinces. They're not going to keep track of that. So then you're like, I want to give it to them for all their social programs and blah. But you don't know if it's actually benefiting them. You don't know if it's actually going towards where it's saying it's going towards, because also you're not probably going to do the work to go and follow it. That's not an insult. That's just, why would I be looking at Quebec's policy that they have at home when Alberta right now is sinking. So we need this money. Like we need to keep ourselves afloat. And then yes, charity then can be a choice, not something forced.
Yeah, not only that, but what was the number? 184 billion over 185 billion over 4 years, sorry. 4 years. That's a presidential term. We have Mark Carney in right now. Most of Canada knows that Mark Carney they may not know how bad he is, but they know he's bad, especially financially. So 4 years, that is a Mark Carney term. What money is he going to waste that on that most Canadians, let alone Albertans, already don't agree with? And now if we're in an independent Alberta, what can we do to help the Canadians that are going to get starved under Mark Carney if we weren't under Mark Carney? What we could actually do in benefit if the money was not under his jurisdiction for him or whatever another 4-year presidential term that people don't agree with to waste on God knows what.
All right, so revenue components. PIT, 46% of contributions reflecting Alberta's high-income workforce. CIT, 15% boosted by oil and gas corporate profits. GST and excise tax, 16% with excess taxes driven by fuel due to Alberta's energy sector. EI, CPP, 22% with potential overpayments due to Alberta's younger employed population. Note, these are not taxes, but are funds given to the federal government by Alberta. So
these are not taxes? Like why?
No, these are not taxes, but funds given to the federal government by Albertans.
Yeah, this last one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh, I see.
Employment insurance.
EI and CPP.
I got you.
So fiscal implications for an independent Alberta. If Alberta were independent, it could retain the full 68 to 75 billion in annual federal tax contributions rather than losing 44 to 47 billion net to Ottawa. This revenue would include Pitt, 32 to 37 billion, could fund enhanced public services such as healthcare and education, or allow tax cuts to stimulate economic growth. CIT, 10 to 11 billion. Retention of corporate taxes, particularly from the energy sector, could support reinvestment in infrastructure or renewable energy diversification. GST, 9 billion. A consumption-based tax that could be maintained or adjusted to balance revenues needs and economic competitiveness. Excise taxes, 2.8 billion. Significant fuel tax revenue could fund transportation or environmental initiatives. EI and CPP, 15 to 17 billion, establishing an Alberta pension plan. An employment insurance system could redirect these funds to benefit Albertans directly, potentially with lower contribution rates due to the province's favorable demographics. Economic and policy benefits. Retaining the full fiscal tax and payments of 68 to 75 billion annually would transform Alberta's fiscal landscape. Infrastructure investment. Funds could address aging infrastructure such as roads, pipelines, and public transit, enhancing economic efficiency. Speed rail.
Speed rail.
Public services. Increased revenue could improve healthcare, education, and social programs, reducing wait times and enhancing quality of life. Economic diversification, investing in technology, renewables, and other sectors could reduce reliance on oil and gas, mitigating volatility risks. Tax reductions, lowering personal or corporate taxes could attract businesses and residents, boosting economic growth. Debt reduction. Alberta's provincial debt, 78.4 billion in 2023, could be addressed more rapidly, freeing up future budgets. Conclusion. An independent Alberta could retain an estimated 68 to 75 billion in annual federal tax revenues with a net gain of 44 to 47 billion after accounting for current federal transfers. This substantial fiscal capacity would enable substantial tax reductions, while transformative investments in infrastructure, public services, and economic diversification, positioning Alberta as a robust, self-sustaining economy. While challenges such as establishing new administrative systems and securing trade agreements exist, the financial case for an independence is compelling, with the potential to significantly enhance Alberta's economic and social prosperity. Estimated costs for replacement of federal services in an independent Alberta. Challenges and considerations. Loss of federal services. Independence would require Alberta to fund services currently provided by Ottawa. Example, defense, international relations, potentially offsetting some revenue gains. Economic transition. Establishing independent tax systems and programs like an Alberta pension plan would require significant upfront costs and administrative restructuring. Trade and market access. Independence could impact trade agreements, requiring negotiations to maintain access to Canadian and international markets. Below is a summary of the key services currently provided by the Canadian federal government that an independent Alberta would need to create or enhance, along with estimated annual costs and initial setup costs for each service. The estimates are based on Alberta's economic share, 11.6% population, 14% of federal revenue. The table also highlights where new or additional funds are required. It should be noted, where desirable, federal employees who transition to service within an independent Alberta would certainly seek to preserve their earned pensions, which would be a point of negotiation with Canada, backstopped by guarantees by Alberta, which we could do if we had that extra bling hanging around. So, won't be going over this chart for the whole 9 yards, but if you just, let's take a note of the services: national defense, international relations and diplomacy, federal health programs, employment insurance, Canada pension plan, border and customs services, federal policing, Indigenous services, and then a subsection of other federal services.
Yeah, and they go through the list of what the little tiny details of that would be. Like, for just one quick example, it's like police training and infrastructure, right, for the federal policing. So it's just, they go in that chart and they list what they think the dollars would be for all of those little setups.
Mm-hmm.
So notes. Initial setup costs $2.8 to $5.7 billion for infrastructure and administrative systems requiring new funds or debt financing, as these are one-time expenses not covered by current provincial budgets.
Mm-hmm. I honestly, again, I really want to emphasize, so initial setup costs $2.8 to $5.7 billion for our federal services that we receive here in Alberta, when we're strictly talking what Albertans are receiving. That is like, you guys heard how much we are giving away, right? And how much we could retain. We could retain $68 to $75 billion, and we could go only 2.8 to 5.7 going towards actually replacing the federal services. So that's pretty impressive.
For initial setup costs, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Initial capital funds, primarily needed for capital investments. Example, defense equipment, embassies, and expanded services. Examples, Indigenous services increase of 2.4 to 3.2 billion. These could be funded by reallocating the 44 to 47 billion over contribution.
Now, I just had a question before you keep going. What is the capital funds and capital investments? What are those exactly?
Well, from what I gather, it says primarily needed for capital investments.
Like you alluded to, the initial setup costs, this is for taking over some infrastructure.
Yeah, I just looked it up and said capital funds are pools of money used for significant long-term investments in assets like land, buildings, or major equipment rather than daily operations, coming from sources like equity, loans, bonds, or donations for growth, infrastructure, or strategic projects in both businesses and public entities.
Yes, and then Indigenous services increase, that's a choice. Mm-hmm. That is something that the APP and the Albertans that came up with this document, considering a future financially viable Alberta, they believe, because of the overcontribution of 44 to 47 billion and other finances that we retain, that we could put more money into the Indigenous services than is already being put in by the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
So
if anything, we could offer you more.
We could offer you more.
Well, also too, right? Like, we're talking infrastructure improvements, quality of life improvements. Like, I understand the change is scary, so I have no judgments to pass about that for people. But that all to say, if we have some courage and some bravery, we would find ourselves in position because of already a strong work ethic, and we have a capable province of capable people in it, which is including the Indigenous, obviously. So I sit back and I go, deep down, it's still a win-win, even though there will be some uncertainties moving forward, obviously. So in the Indigenous services, Maddie just read. So for a point of reference, the vast majority of services encountered by Albertans are already provided by government within the province, many of which could well be privatized with proper oversight and regulation by the government. And then there's a series of examples here, which we will leave to you.
When it says privatized, does it mean like privatized as an Albertan businesses, like just instead of it being public by federal or even public by provincial, it means like
it's showing
grassroots?
It's showing you, right, the current provincial jurisdictions of these particular, like, this is stuff that we would still be, like, say, for example, if we didn't want to put it under a government cloak, we could run, say, privatization. Is there members of our community that have an action plan and they would like to take this on? And then, right, like there could be profit models brought into that. Like it could be very low profit. But so these are some of the things that happen when you try to like privatize, say, certain sections of a healthcare program, whereas not the whole thing, because then we'd be a country. So the healthcare program would be structured. That also, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So, but this one will kind of get explained that privatization is an option. It's just an option.
Does it talk about why the potential of privatizing would be beneficial instead of keeping it either provincial or municipal jurisdiction?
Sometimes this comes down to competency is usually one of the largest arguments that I've heard in this regard, just even with my time being involved with like different, like the CA board and the things that concern people and entrepreneurship. There's, how do you put this? That line that says, you know, the 9 words you never want to hear is, hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And one of the reasons why that is that government and competency, it's not necessarily that your government is built on merit. It is assumed at times, and there is data to back that up, that privatization, you're getting entrepreneurs that have a higher meritocracy for solving the problem, and it's in their interests as a business owner. You know, usually the hardest working person of the kitchen is the restaurant owner. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so privatization could find the individual streamlining a problem that is under a municipal jurisdiction that perhaps, this is not a guarantee, but perhaps if it was privatized, you would find better efficiencies, maybe trimming the fat. But another thing that could play a role, because the one thing about trimming the fat is you could be trimming it too much. Like there's also the need for community and say, for example, taking a loss on the transportation infrastructure system of your country because it's under, you know, like the government. Say we had an independent Alberta and we set up high-speed rail. We could run the rail at a deficit knowing that that tool for your citizens and for the ability to move product rapidly and people, right, brain power around your province, your overall GDP will rise. So this is the rising tide floats all ships, although the government would be taking a loss. Now, then some people would say, well, then we should be privatizing the rail. And it's like, well, not necessarily if you see that as a whole, its contributions. And then that could be explained even to the people. And if all of a sudden they feel like, well, we'd like to be able to make a profit on this. It's like, well, then I guess we could come up with some ideas, you know. But
yeah, but I mean, the whole, that's a really good point and a good idea, because even if with the idea of this whole document is that relocalizing things and minimalizing the red tape surrounding taxes, that we're going to pay as much as we need to keep something like that publicly funded rail to keep going. That still brings everybody's bottom line up. And because it's bringing everybody's bottom line up, we still have more money in our pockets. So it's like really making profit. You're making profit in the other sectors that are happening because of this publicly funded entity.
Yeah, everybody can literally get to work faster, and that means that they can get more done in the day. Like
exactly,
that just makes sense in terms of saving time.
And we don't have the same taxes either.
Yeah.
We're saying we are not going to have all of these different taxes. So even financially running this potential rail line would still be easier. And it's because we'll have more money in our pockets because we're not going to be drowning in all these taxes.
And like it mentioned, it's like even if you did have some certain taxes on it, it said that it can get reinvested into the project itself. And then that starts getting it even more towards, if it's at a deficit, earning some revenue. But my question is you mentioned that you could run it at a deficit if it was public, and then some would argue that that's why it should be privatized. Why is that? Why is it that it is apparently assume that if it's public, it's going to be a deficit, and if it's private, it might help with it creating revenue. Why is that?
Like I said, right? So the private sector versus something like a governmental sector is that you could end up with government employees, because the government, like even the employees that work for the government on average, we are talking about administrative roles, bureaucracy, if you will. And this is not to insult the people that are working in the government. But what ends up being the case is that there's a little bit of a security. There is a tendency to overpay. Pensions, have their certain guarantees.
Bonuses.
So, and the thing is the government's not taking any risks. Government employees are not taking any risks. Like, they don't need to, because the money is coming through profits for your country.
Don't you mean they would be taking?
So no.
risks?
The government doesn't take any, because it's all of our money that makes the government profitable. It's the citizens from the private sectors, from the commercial sectors, from an agreed taxation strategy, which is something we would also need to do.
Wouldn't it seem like they are taking risks because they know it's not their money, so they're like being less really like stringent about it and frugal with it because it's not theirs?
Risks by change. So they're not incentivized to make efficiency. When Dad's talking about risk in business, he means they're not trying to make things more efficient. They're not trying to get the newest technology, because
I see.
They're not in the mode of profit, which is what, if you're private, it's your company. You're like,
innovation,
how do I more
nothing
innovating?
like that.
They're not innovating.
Right.
That's what he meant.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And governments have a tendency to expand their own bureaucracy. And we got so much historical evidence. This is not just an Alberta thing. This is, we can tap in right all the way down to like Athens during Socrates and Plato. Like, government just has a tendency to continue to expand, and then you end up in a circumstance like we have, in the United States. I think the largest debt owner of the national debt for the United States is the government. Like, that ends up being your biggest employee, so to speak. And in the private sector, because the risk, they're putting up their own capital, they're coming up with an entrepreneurial plan to try to have success in an endeavor. There is risk there because they're putting it forward. Like, tons of businesses fail. Tons. You come up with a widget and all of a sudden people are like, I don't like your widget, and nobody buys your widget. But you went and put some infrastructure, you did a thing, and it didn't quite work out for you. So they feel that there's probably more motivation in the private sector, but that's, once again, though, that's not always true, because then what you end up also having is people that get so they become and also they'll become beholden to their shareholders.
Yes.
Right. And then shareholders want a new golf bag every year, and they want to be able to, right. So it's like, it's just something for nothing, and they forget what it meant to be hard work. It's an old line, but it's like it's like you've forgotten the height from with which you have fallen, and then you're getting accustomed to certain incomes and revenues coming in. And so now the privateer or what have you, they don't want to take really any risk. If anything, they keep chopping and dividing that which brought them success, when in all actuality, you would like them to take risk for expansion and possibility. That means R&D, right? And sometimes, your shareholders are like, well, I don't want to do risk. It's audience capture for the YouTuber, right? Like, all of a sudden now you can't talk about different subjects because everybody's clicking for this, and now you get a positive feedback loop. That can also happen through the private sector.
I feel like that can happen through the public though as well.
It can happen either way.
We already know the reasons behind NGOs of how those are their shareholders, right? And even them not wanting to take the ability to venture out into the realm of risk for actually anything good is because of the fact that they have those strongholds against them as well. So I feel like private or public, they both can be leashed.
So then I guess what we would want to encourage is citizen engagement.
Yeah.
And they would need to understand that this is the game that can be played. You got to keep a weathered eye on the horizon when there's a bit of storm clouds brewing. Otherwise, you could be bringing your ship into a tempest.
And my next question, sorry, I have one more question, is what does contractors have to, how does that play in? Because I know that government, when things are private in an infrastructure project, we're just playing with the high-speed rail example, right? Usually you're going to contract with different entities. How does that work versus privatized, and how is it better or worse?
Well, so here's something though, that's called the private-public partnership,
right.
The PPP. And if we have any understanding of how badly those have been corrupted, because then you get cronyism in there.
Yeah,
then you have favored contractors that lace the campaign trail of individuals that are making decisions for city councils and what have you. Then you get entities of foreign influence that come in. So I feel like no matter how you play the game, this still falls upon the shoulders of the people.
Yeah. You need active minds.
Yeah, and engaged citizenry, like perhaps even running it where it's like, well, look, like we have to pay attention to the contractors that are doing provincial infrastructure, and it's like, fair enough, you're big and you're good at what you're doing here, but we would like to give a percentage of this contract also to an up and coming Alberta, based company, so that they can get some growth and some experience, so that they don't get mulched by the big guys.
Yeah,
because then it's literally actually still a sort of fascist, actually.
Well, it ends up being your corporations start to grow, and then instead of your government being too big, you've got corporations that are too big and eating up everything, like maybe like an Amazon, for example, or
and it happened,
Microsoft,
and it happened because of the government, though. So it's like, it's like we don't entirely want privatization, as Maddie said, because it can go down the monopolistic kind of fascist. Everything is kind of run by corporate entities. But I mean, like what you're describing is the fact that the government can be in bed with these corporate entities and help perpetuate that anyway. So
it goes to the moral of the story that no matter the system, like
that's right,
the socialism, fascism, any ism, including things like democracy, monarchy, whatever the system is, including financial markets, it fails without it, which is why that podcast with Martin Armstrong, Brett Oland it was the Shaun Newman podcast, if I'm correct.
Yes.
It was so good because even with some of the considerations within this document, and then what Brett Oland was bringing, a potential Alberta currency, Martin said, and he is a financial expert, and he's like, regardless of all of that, without people, population, good families, working people that make things, because energy, and this is something Dad you say all the time, energy is a direct correlation to prosperity and financial output. So we want a good system. We want to trust our people. We need people that produce, and we need people that think. We need a discerning population. So regardless of how that looks, that needs to happen. And then government, you can rely on the politicians a bit more, because they're a bit more of a thinking, producing mind. They're a bit more of an artisan. You can rely on the corporations a bit more. You can rely on the contractors more. All of that jazz.
Yeah, and have legitimate, one of the things that, we're getting a little off topic, but the thing is one of the things that Martin also made mention in that same conversation with Shaun Newman and Brett Oland, shout out to Bow Valley Credit Union. This is also, you have to have a justice system that you can count on.
Right.
Because the thing is that if there's not consequences for the individuals that try to run exploitations, this will be an odd thing for maybe audiences to hear because of some of the misplaced biases about China, but they jail their fraudsters. Okay, people that commit fraud, and they on all levels, municipal levels, governmental levels, all the different provincial levels, because there's several different provinces even within China. If you're a banker and you don't follow through on your word, it's why they have several different branches of infrastructure banking. You're going to jail, right? Like if we had what happened in 2008, okay, then every single banker, that's like you're hanging from the neck till dead, or you're in jail for life because you robbed people, and then the government that you had your hand in went and bailed out them, and that came from where? Like the government has no money. It gets it from exploiting the people. So anyways, what
did we just cover? Just so we can recap for them what we just went over. We went over the notes for the initial reader going into it, the
executive summary,
introduction, and the executive summary. And then we also went over revenue available to an independent Alberta using historical data section. And we went over estimated cost for replacement of federal services in an independent Alberta.
Yes.
The key takeaways is that we can take over the federal services, and we can add some more services. They specified the Indigenous services to better those communities, because they have been just as raped and robbed as every average Albertan has for just as long.
Get more money, we can do more with it.
It was your money to begin with.
Exactly.
Don't you want some of it back?
Exactly, right?
So that concludes part 1 of this Politics at Home with Holmes, Alberta Prosperity. Is it possible?
The value of freedom.
Yeah. Till next time, tune in.